I have a strange disease. My legs go weak when I smell his pheromones, but we are both alphas. In order to hide this strange disease, I deliberately avoided him. Who would have thought that when the university started, we were assigned to the same dormitory? The familiar smell of red wine spread in the dormitory. During the long night, I could only draw the curtains and bite my pillow. Realizing that I would be discovered if I continued like this, I lied and said I had found an omega partner and was moving out. The night I got married, Eric massaged my glands and deliberately emitted pheromones to bring my estrus period forward. The low voice in my ear is full of temptation. Does the omega's pheromones smell as good as mine? 01. After I discovered my illness and escaped, I imagined meeting Eric again countless times. Maybe they each have their own careers, maybe they each have started a family, or maybe they just happened to pass each other on the street. But I really didn't expect it to happen so quickly. I finally reached the 6th floor carrying a lot of bags, opened the dormitory door and saw a man sitting by the window. Even though we were only apart for a year, I still couldn't stop missing you when I saw your familiar eyes. The heavy luggage that he couldn't hold in his hands fell to the ground with a dull sound. Here's some noise. Eric glanced over at me and chuckled when he saw me. Sean, long time no see. I stared blankly at Eric's cold eyes. There was no trace of smile in those eyes that always looked at me with tenderness. Although I know Eric must be angry about my leaving without saying goodbye. But I had never seen Eric look like this before. His expressionless face made me feel a little breathless. What a coincidence. I stood at the door, not knowing whether to go in or go back, and could only smile awkwardly. What the coincidence, it makes me want to cry. I had specifically applied for a city far away from home, but I didn't expect to meet Eric. Now I know he is angry, but I can't tell you why. This makes me say, it is said that as a big alpha, my legs will go weak when I smell the pheromones of another alpha. I can't say it even if you kill me. Unfortunately. Eric curled his lips sarcastically and shook his head, staring at me with his surprisingly dark eyes, giving me goosebumps. He said this and there was no next sentence. What does unfortunately mean? Do you not want to see me? I felt a little disappointed. My sudden disappearance really destroyed the relationship between Eric and me. An atmosphere of silence spread, just as I was racking my brains to find an excuse for my disappearance to ease the atmosphere. Eric suddenly shifted his gaze, lowered his head and took out a pack of cigarettes from his pocket. I saw him skillfully take out a cigarette, light it and put it to his lips. My pupils constricted. When did you start smoking? Eric pulled the corner of his mouth with a forced smile. 1 year ago. A year ago, I discovered that my illness had suddenly left me. After we became adults, Eric and I went to the bar together. That was when I first discovered my illness. The dim lights in the bar were matched with lyrical music, and strong liquor became the catalyst. Suddenly there was a commotion in the crowd, and a strong smell of orange spread among the crowd. An omega in the bar went into heat. The crazy pheromones caused all the alphas present to become aroused. But I didn't feel anything at all. Eric was disturbed and leaned on my neck with a slightly red face. Sean, are you responding? What's the reaction? I frowned, somewhat confused by what Eric said. I just smell a strong orange scent. Was the drink spilled? Eric was obviously stunned for a moment after hearing my answer, and then a low laugh sounded in my ears. You haven't reacted to the smell of an omega? Are you really an alpha? Is this the taste of omega? I sniffed it hard, but felt nothing except that the fragrance was so strong that it was a bit suffocating. But common sense tells me that this is an abnormal reaction. I'm a little nervous. Will there be any problem? Eric's slightly cool nose rubbed the inhibitor on my gland and sniffed it lightly. No problem, I'm fine. I don't know if it's my illusion, but I always feel that there is a hint of disappointment in Eric's tone. That's good. I breathed a sigh of relief. Eric's face against my neck quickly became hot. Does it hurt? I touched his forehead and it was hot. Eric hummed softly with a nasal tone and leaned lazily against me. I took off his restraint sticker. Will this make you feel better? Before I could hear Eric's answer. Amid the strong orange scent that filled the room, a strong smell of red wine rushed into my nostrils. My legs suddenly went limp. Eric quickly pulled me into his arms. Why are you still half a beat slow in reacting? It felt a little funny as Eric's fingertips gently pressed on my heated gland. But I clearly felt that it was not because of the orange flavor, but because of the red wine flavor. The owner of the red wine smell is right in front of me. It's Eric's pheromone. But we are both alpha. 03. Being held in Eric's arms, I was surrounded by the smell of red wine emanating from him. I couldn't help but twist my body in unbearable pain. The roles changed at this moment. Eric, who had just been lying on me sickly, now had clear eyes, while I couldn't even stand steadily. Why such a big reaction? Eric frowned. Are you leaving? I nodded frantically because I had breathed in too much of Eric's pheromones at such close range that if I stayed any longer, I was afraid my estrus period would come earlier. But I soon regretted making this decision. Eric's home is closer to the bar. He helped me back to his home. There are other smells in the bar that can dilute the smell of red wine that makes me feel dizzy. But in Eric's house, his smell is everywhere. I felt even worse and tried hard to cheer myself up. Eric, do you have any suppressants at home? No. Eric denied it quickly, and I bit my pillow in despair when I heard his words. I can only bear it on my own. Eric saved the poor pillow corner from my mouth. His voice was hoarse. If you feel particularly uncomfortable, I can help you. My head was dizzy and I was thinking, you don't need to help me, just stay away from me. But I couldn't open my mouth, so I could only let Eric help me to relieve it. The next day, my legs were weak, but my mind clearly remembered everything that happened. Eric is still asleep. Without alarming him, I rushed to the hospital for a physical examination and found out that I was suffering from a rare disease. It is possible that the pheromones of the alpha will induce estrus, even more severe than the omega reaction. In other words, as long as Eric doesn't wear inhibitors, I will be in heat anytime I'm around him. I couldn't accept it, so I packed my bags and transferred to another school overnight. This is the first time I've seen Eric since then. 04. I had a lot of luggage for school, so I made my bed. Eric smoked a cigarette by himself. One after another, looking at me a little worried. But I didn't know in what capacity I could dissuade him and could only worry in my heart. I was relieved when the other roommates arrived, thinking Eric would stop smoking for the sake of the other roommates. The result was beyond my expectation. Justin pushed the door open and frowned. This cigarette? My mind raced, anticipating what he would say next. I can tell it's a good cigarette just by smelling it. Brother, give me one. I was very disappointed. Two smokers got together. Eric sat next to the window, and most of the smoke drifted out of the window, leaving only a faint smell of cigarettes in the room. It didn't reach the point of choking, but I still coughed twice on purpose. Eric raised his eyelids and looked at me without saying anything, but put the half-remaining cigarette into the ashtray. Justin glanced at me, then at Eric. Take a deep breath and smoke until there is only a cigarette but left, then throw it into the ashtray. He turned around and grinned at me, revealing his neat white teeth. Don't worry, brother. We are very qualified. He made me laugh and cry. 05. After packing our luggage for an entire afternoon, we were all sweating. Justin seemed to know another roommate, so he packed up and took a shower. My eyes widened as I watched them come out of the bathroom steaming hot. Are you guys in an AA relationship? What's this about AA relationship? We're just good buddies. Justin smiled and hooked his arm around Patrick's neck. It's so convenient to take a shower together. Haven't you ever taken a shower with your good buddy? I was shocked. If we became good friends, could we take a shower together? Eric, who had been silent all this time, suddenly spoke. How long have you known each other? Justin raised his head with a proud look on his face. We have been playing together since we were little. Really? Then your relationship must be very good. Eric said in a flat tone. Of course. Hearing Eric's question, Justin became more eager to show off and pulled Patrick, who had a helpless look on his face. We've never had any conflicts. I'm so envious. As he said this, Eric glanced at me vaguely. I don't understand what he meant. I could only pretend I didn't hear it and quietly packed up my toiletries. After I finished washing, Eric passed by me. I smelled the familiar scent of red wine, My waist went limp again, and I quickly ran to the bed. The room was already filled with the scent of alpha. The dormitory is a relatively private space, so it is normal for people to take off the suppression stickers. The body was aroused and reacted again. Only then did I realize that I was having a headache. How about it? My pheromones smell like pear. It smells nice, right? Justin saw me coming out and started talking to me with a smile. I nodded, trying to look normal. It smells nice. Sean, what does your pheromone smell like? Why can't I smell it? Justin took a deep breath. There was only the smell of 3 alphas in the air. So he became curious about my pheromones and looked at me with his big bright eyes. It's lychee flavored. I put on a suppressant patch. I replied casually and pulled the bed curtains. Waves of heat surged in my body, which was not a pleasant feeling. I fumbled for the inhibitor and gave myself an injection. Going to bed so early? Justin muttered quietly, although in his heart he wanted to ask why he had to wear suppression stickers in the dormitory. But he wasn't the kind of person who didn't know what was going on. When he saw me draw the bed curtains, he tactfully stopped talking. After an injection of inhibitor, my symptoms were much relieved. I breathed a sigh of relief. But the happiness didn't last long. After Eric came out of the shower, the whole room was suddenly filled with a strong smell of red wine pheromones. I felt my blood, which had just cooled down, begin to boil again, and I groaned. As soon as the sound came out, I cried out inwardly, "Oh no!" and the room suddenly became eerily quiet. Eric's clear voice broke the deadlock. "Sean, what's wrong with you?" I endured the discomfort and said, "I have a cold." Eric fell silent, and just when I thought he was going to come over and open my bed curtains, I heard clear footsteps, but they didn't come towards me, but turned around and got on the bed. I breathed a sigh of relief and suppressed the vague sense of loss in my heart. The doctor had said that inhibitors were useless. Now it seems that it is true. 06. I stayed up all night, not daring to move, and could only bite the pillow and endure it. The next day I was exhausted. "Wow, you look terrible." Justin pointed at my face in surprise. I smiled bitterly. Anyone who endures it all night will look bad. If I continue like this, I will be sent to the hospital for unfulfilled sexual desire within a month. This can't be done. I slapped my face to encourage myself. Be sure to find a suitable reason to move out. I came to class yawning all the time, and the first class was a water class. The young couple in front were kissing each other without any hesitation. The delicate Omega lies in the Alpha's arms. "Miller, when are we going to move out?" "I'm about to go into heat. Once I'm done packing, we'll move out." The Alpha pinched the boy's little face in his arms and said lovingly. And in a state of half-sleep and half-wakefulness, it seemed as if my Ren and Du meridians were opened. As long as I say I'm in love. Moving out is easy. This reason is absolutely perfect. Perfect and makes me want to laugh. So I fell asleep with a smile on my face. When I woke up, I was lying in Eric's arms. Confused, I struggled to get up from Eric's arms. "How come?" Eric interrupted me, changing his cold attitude from yesterday, and said in a gentle voice, "Didn't you sleep well?" When he looked at me with calm but concerned eyes, I felt as if I was back in high school. When I was in high school, I felt sleepy during class breaks and it was uncomfortable to sleep on my stomach, so Eric would considerately act as my pillow. At that time, my classmates said that we were corny, but I didn't take it seriously. Now that I think about it, we were too intimate at that time. I rubbed my hot cheek with my knuckles awkwardly and nodded under Eric's gaze. "Yeah, I'm a little tired." "Make sure you get plenty of rest." Eric raised his hand as if he wanted to touch my face, but when his hand reached in front of him, he paused and turned to tidy up my hair, which was messed up from sleeping. After combing his hair, Eric lowered his eyes and picked up his school bag with a cold tone. "I'm leaving now." But I hadn't reacted when Eric walked to the classroom door. I only came to my senses when he pushed the door open and his back disappeared in the door. "Quickly pack up your books." When I chased out, Eric was nowhere to be seen. I sighed heavily. But it's better for our relationship to become unfamiliar than for Eric to feel sick and become distant after knowing my illness, I thought to myself. After I left, White smoke slowly rose from behind the wall on the other side of the classroom. 07. Although I already have an excuse to move out. But I have to stay in the dormitory for at least a week so that I don't seem so deliberate. In order to keep the week from being exposed, I bought piles of suppressants and suppressant patches. Although the doctor said that inhibitors are ineffective, it is better to use them than not to use them. Also, I silently clenched the sleeping pills that I had bought with great difficulty. This is my last trump card. If you fall asleep, you won't react. Everything is ready. I quietly wait for the night to come. Abnormally, when Eric came out of the shower, his pheromones were not in the room. Eric, are you wearing a suppressant patch too? Justin was confused. It must be so uncomfortable to wear that thing, so why did so many people like to wear it? I was also confused and listened attentively to Eric's answer. Maybe it's time to get susceptible to the virus. I'm worried it might affect you. Eric's voice was calm and emotionless. He turned his head and glanced at me inconspicuously before quickly looking away. Have a good rest tonight. It was not known who he was talking to because Eric was talking to the wall. Justin looked left and right, and seeing no one responded, he couldn't let the words drop, so he replied, "Yeah, okay." But I turned pale with shock. Did he know? It must be just a coincidence, I comforted myself. I ran away after I found out about the disease. How could Eric know about it? I must have scared myself, I laughed to myself. But Eric's susceptible period has arrived, which is a relief for me. Finally, I can have a good sleep. But this is only temporary. It would be safest for me to find an Omega partner and move out, but who should I find? I fell into deep thought. 08. After thinking about it all night, the next day I came up with the perfect candidate, Adam. He is my good friend after I transferred to another school. Although he is an alpha, he is cute. Besides, I can't find anyone else to act with me. Perfect candidate. I contacted him to explain the situation, and sure enough, he readily agreed. I waited quietly for a week. Everyone was in the dormitory on the weekend. I acted casually, but in fact I was very deliberate. I'm in a relationship and I'm planning on moving out. Eric's hand that was swiping the phone paused, and before he could react, Justin screamed in surprise. What? This is too fast. Let me see what that Omega looks like. Justin came up to me with a gossipy look, and I cut the photo to show him. Well, she's very cute. I'm so envious. As expected, good-looking people can easily find a partner. Justin smiled wryly and poked Patrick in the stomach with his elbow, making him laugh. Justin felt insulted and asked, "What are you laughing at?" Patrick looked innocent. "You hit a sore spot for me." I looked at their relaxed atmosphere with envy. If I hadn't been sick, it would probably be the same with Eric. When Eric heard the news that I was no longer single, he just sat there in silence with his phone on the table. He lowered his head and took out a cigarette, but didn't smoke it, just played with it in his hand. After meeting my eyes, he slammed the cigarette in his hand into the ashtray. He pulled the corners of his mouth with a forced smile. "That's quite a feat, Sean." The sound sounded like a sigh, but it also contained a hint of gnashing of teeth. Eric was angry. Although it was quite unethical for me to suddenly end my relationship, Eric's reaction was bigger than I expected. I don't know what to do. My silence caused Eric's dissatisfaction. He looked at me helplessly, and there were too many emotions in that look for me to interpret. It made my heart ache. Eric picked up his phone and walked out. I was worried and followed him out. I don't think there will be a fight. Should we go out? Justin looked at Patrick in confusion. Don't worry about it. Patrick looked at him helplessly. Justin was good in every way except that he was a little silly. Okay. Justin rubbed his nose. But if you ever secretly get unattached behind my back, I'll beat the shit out of you. He clenched his fists and widened his eyes, half joking, half threatening. Patrick pulled the corner of his mouth and said in a mean way, "I'm so scared." Justin punched him when he was mocked. "You're asking for a fight." 09. Eric, wait for me. Seeing Eric turning and disappearing from sight, I hurriedly stopped him. Eric stopped when he heard my voice. But he didn't turn around, leaving me with only a lonely back. Eric comes from a single-parent family. He is 2 years younger than me and he likes to get angry very much. When I was very young, I realized that Eric was my younger brother and that I had to give in to him all the time so that he would be happy. Little Eric doesn't like me playing with other people. When I play with my classmates, he will stand beside me with a frown on his face and look unhappy. Although he didn't say anything, I knew he was jealous, so I teased him on purpose. If Eric is unhappy again, I will be angry. Little Eric threw himself into my arms in fear, looking at me with tears in his eyes. Brother Sean, don't be angry, be happy. I found Eric funny when I teased him, but I felt sad when I saw him crying. After a few more times, I gradually stopped making friends except Eric. I don't feel lonely, one friend is just enough for me. I only need Eric, and Eric only needs me. But how did I get this disease? I would rather undergo secondary differentiation and become an omega than have this disease. But I can't say. I took a few steps forward and grabbed his sleeves. What's wrong with you? Why are you angry? Let's talk it out. Speak nicely. Eric chuckled, seeming to be very disdainful. He turned around, looking down at me with hidden anger in his eyes, his voice suppressed and hoarse. I've been holding back for too long, Sean. Although Eric has always called me by my full name since we met again, this time my heart trembled. I didn't know what to say, so I could only speak dryly. Don't be angry. Oh. Eric sneered, leaned against the wall as if he was very tired, and pinched his eyebrows with his slender white fingertips. Are you feeling uncomfortable? I don't like to see Eric frowning, but since he's playing dumb and not explaining anything, I can only use the most useless words of comfort. For example, if you are angry, don't be angry. If you are sad, don't be sad. If you are sad, don't be sad. Perhaps realizing that I couldn't say anything he wanted to hear, he took a few deep breaths and suddenly became strangely calm. You shouldn't have come out to find me. I was planning to give up. Eric's voice was very low, like a whisper to himself. What? I didn't hear clearly. Nothing. He shook his head and twitched the corners of his mouth as if he was not smiling. Come on, you want to move out, right? I'll help you pack your luggage. Seeing that there was no anger on Eric's face, I was completely relieved. Good. Since I had just checked in, I didn't have much luggage and I packed it all in no time. I carried the bags and Eric carried the suitcase, and we finally made it downstairs. I'll take care of the rest. I called a taxi and it will be here soon. I wiped the sweat from my forehead. Aren't you welcome to see your new home? Eric raised his eyebrows, the coldness on his face no longer there. When I suddenly heard Eric's request, I was stunned for a moment, and then I realized it and felt happy. Do you want to go? Of course you can. I couldn't wait to speak, fearing that Eric would go back on his word. Eric's sudden show of goodwill got me talking, and I kept chattering after we got in the car. After I move, if you want to come hang out with me, just text me in advance. I'm always available. The house I rent has 2 bedrooms and a living room. You can stay for a few days if you want. The location of the house is very good. Because I was so happy, I talked a lot at once. Eric listened silently and nodded occasionally, his dark eyes fixed on my lips without moving. I realized very early on that although I was the older brother and often took care of Eric when we were young, as we grew up, Eric became more mature and took care of me instead. It would be better to say that I can't live without Eric than to say that Eric can't live without me. So I cherish our friendship even more. I've said so much that my face is red from tiredness. Am I a bit annoying? When I came to my senses, I covered my mouth embarrassedly. I was the only one talking the whole time. Eric didn't say a word. When I looked at him, he turned his head away from my gaze and pressed the window button with his finger. The moment the wind blew in, I heard him say, "No. Let's enjoy ourselves for a while now." In the year since I left, Eric has become increasingly confusing. Sometimes I find it hard to understand what he says, like just now. I pursed my lips and stopped talking. 11. I moved all the luggage with great effort. I brushed the non-existent dust off my palms and said, "Let's go eat." No rush. Eric leaned lazily against the door, his arms folded across his chest. When will he come? I quickly realized that Eric was asking Adam. He'll be next week. I made up a date at random. Eric seemed very happy to hear this, his eyes curved with a smile. There is plenty of time. I have gradually adapted to Eric's way of thinking. I replied along the lines of what he said. It's quite sufficient indeed. Hey, why is the door locked? I walked to the door and was about to open it, but found that the door handle was hard and I couldn't press it. Eric held out his hand, the port key dangling from his index finger. He leaned against the wall and looked at me. Are you looking for this? Suddenly, an ominous feeling enveloped my whole body. My voice trembled. Eric, let's go eat. I'm not hungry, I want to eat something else. Eric's eyes were full of teasing, and suddenly the red wine-flavored pheromones exploded in front of me, sweeping across the entire room. Too close to him. I took several puffs of pheromones and my head felt a little unclear. Bit the tip of my tongue hard. I managed to speak. Eric, what are you doing? I want to go out. He didn't say anything, but I couldn't wait any longer and reached out to grab the key in his hand. Eric deliberately raised his arm and embraced with his left hand. My legs were already weak, and I fell into his arms, taking in several more large breaths of pheromones. Eric's low laugh could be heard in my ears. He spoke in my ear with a sigh. Does the Omega's pheromones smell as good as mine? I was struck by lightning, and this was my last thought before I lost consciousness. Finished. Eric carried me sideways to the bed. I was completely dominated by pheromones and held his collar with both hands. Kiss me. I raised my head and stared at Eric's pale lips thirstily. They looked soft and chewy, and must be delicious. Eric curled his lips. I want to get it myself. I pulled his head up and kissed him, but when our lips were about to touch, Eric deliberately raised his head, so I could only kiss his chin. How? I looked at him in confusion. Eric smiled slyly. No. Realizing that I had been fooled, I felt a little angry and a little aggrieved. She pulled Eric's collar hard and tried to kiss his lips. But Eric was determined not to let me kiss him. After trying several times to kiss him without success, I pushed Eric away angrily, turned my head and buried my face in the pillow. Eric was not in a hurry. He lay on the edge of the bed, looking at me with his handsome face. He has nothing to worry about, but I suffer. Every breath of pheromones feels like I'm being roasted on fire, and every cell in my body is clamoring. I want to kiss him, I want to kiss Eric, I want to be kissed by Eric, I want to be marked by Eric. So I was the first to lose this silent battle. I turned my head, revealing half of my face that was already red from the hook. I looked at Eric and spoke shyly but firmly. Give me a kiss. Elder brother. When did I realize that if I called Eric brother, he would satisfy all my needs? I was very lazy when I was in high school. During dinner, my classmates would go together, but I just wanted to catch up on my sleep in the classroom. Eric didn't want to go alone, so I acted like a spoiled child and called him brother. The tips of his ears turned red enough to bleed. He probably had never seen such a shameless person in his life, and he always compromised in every confrontation. This trick has been tried and tested. Sure enough, after hearing this, Eric's eyes suddenly became dangerous, the veins on his temples bulged, and the protruding Adam's apple in his throat rolled up and down, and I could hear the sound of him swallowing saliva. Just when I thought Eric was going to kiss me, he spoke. The clear boy's voice was hoarse with desire, but his voice was trembling slightly, containing unknown fear. The last time I touched you, you hid for a year. How many years are you going to hide after I touch you this time? Eric's bony hands were shaking slightly. I instinctively felt sad, but I couldn't say anything to comfort her. I won't hide, brother. Please help me, I feel so uncomfortable. I curled up in pain, gasping for breath, and looked pitifully at Eric, the person who could help me relieve my stress. Eric finally stood up and leaned over me. His voice was very soft, like a fleeting gust of wind. Sean, tell me you love me. Brother, I love you. Eric shook his head. Call me Eric, Eric. Eric, I love you. I love you too. Eric closed his eyes and kissed her. The jelly was not delicious at all. It was cold, bitter, and astringent, so astringent that it hurt my heart. In this madness, I woke up first. Eric frowned tightly, and I went up and touched his forehead. I have a slight fever. Yesterday, I lost consciousness and followed my alpha instinct to mark Eric madly. Now the two alpha pheromones in his body were competing with each other. Eric's glands were covered with my teeth marks, and I touched mine, and they were intact. Even more guilty, I got out of bed. There was some fever medicine in my unopened luggage, so I made a pack for Eric. As soon as I got out of bed, I felt a strong force on my wrist. You still have the energy to run. I should have marked you yesterday. Eric's voice was so low that I suspected I was hallucinating. Eric, are you awake? I called softly. Eric tried hard to open his eyelids. His eyelashes and eyebrows were trembling, and I could see that his will and body were struggling. Eric, you should have a good rest. As I spoke to comfort him, Eric finally opened his eyes. Don't go. Okay, I won't leave. I quickly followed his wishes and promised. After hearing this, Eric seemed to be finally relieved. He fell into a coma again and pulled my hand down. I smiled bitterly and resigned myself to my fate as I made him a packet of instant powder. Eric, take your medicine. Eric didn't respond. I took the spoon with the medicine and handed it to Eric's mouth. His mouth was tightly closed, and the medicine soup all flowed down the corners of his mouth. This person, I had no choice but to swallow the medicine in one gulp and feed it to him mouth to mouth. The medicine was so bitter that my face frowned. I was thinking about how to pry open Eric's mouth. When our lips touched, Eric seemed to turn on a switch and pressed the back of my head, deepening the kiss. After the kiss, Eric's face was full of satisfaction. So sweet, any more? I looked at the empty potion and the two bitter words on the potion box, and twitched my lips. No more. Eric smacked his lips, as if he felt very sorry. Then he hugged me and fell into a deep sleep, and slept until the sun set. Eric woke up and the first thing he did was to touch the quilt beside him. The temperature there had already turned cold, just like that morning, and the panic in his heart could not stop surging up. He sat up suddenly and shouted, "Sean! I'm here!" Hearing the noise in the house, I closed the book and opened the balcony door. You didn't leave. Seeing that I was fine in front of him, Eric breathed a sigh of relief. Well, I'm not leaving. I won't leave from now on. What's the meaning? Hearing this, Eric unconsciously clutched the quilt. I just looked into his eyes, conveying my sincerity and determination. Eric, let's be together. Eric and I are together, and we should have been together a long time ago. There will never be another person in the world who treats me as well as Eric does. But when Eric took me to meet his parents, I still chickened out. Standing at the door of Eric's house, I finally couldn't help but speak. Actually, we don't have to tell Eric's mother. Why? Eric didn't understand. We are in an AA relationship, your father. I didn't say anything else. Eric's mother is a poor person. Her husband, her childhood sweetheart of 20 years, was actually a closeted man. After she became pregnant, he abandoned her and her child because he met his destined alpha. Eric's mother gave birth to Eric alone. Eric and I grew up together, but I have very little impression of Eric's mother. The few times we met, she always looked haggard and impatient. I don't know if she has any reservations about AA relationships, but it won't be easy for her to accept it. Eric seemed to understand my hesitation. He chuckled, "You actually still remember this? I had forgotten about it." After saying that, he scratched the palm of my hand and winked at me. "It's okay, just follow me in." Shit, it's another deadline. As soon as he opened the door, Eric's mother's angry roar came over. "I got avrikt." Eric seemed to be used to this scene. He shook my hand to comfort me. "Mom, I brought my boyfriend back." "Wait a minute, I'll finish this one." Eric's mother replied without even looking up. Eric shrugged helplessly. "Let's wait." I sat on the couch with Eric for 2 hours. He was casual and relaxed, while I was serious and composed. Seeing that I was too nervous, Eric smiled happily. "Relax a little, my mom won't eat you." Eric really is talking without any pain. I secretly decided that when I take him home, I will leave him alone for 2 hours to let him feel my pain. My back and waist were aching from sitting too straight, and when I was about to give up, Eric's mother finally finished her work. I'm finally done with the painting. I'm so tired. She rubbed her waist and hammered her arms. When he came in front of me, a pair of tired and lifeless eyes glanced at me, which made me break out in a cold sweat. She looked at Eric and me for a while, then suddenly smiled and spoke in a clear and crisp voice. Not bad, I finally got her. I've always thought you two could do it. But is Eric's mother really like this? Before I could react, she sat next to me and pulled my hand. Sean, you must stop being angry with Eric. Last time you transferred to another school, he couldn't eat or sleep well. He was busy looking for your school every day. He finally found out that you applied to the same university. In order to share a dormitory with you, he called the counselor and the principal and finally changed the dormitory. You don't know that he cried sadly every night under the quilt. After hearing a series of revelations from his mother, Eric could no longer maintain his casual sitting posture. He sat up straight, his face red as if blood was about to drip out. Mom, stop talking nonsense. I'm not kidding, that's just how you are. Eric's mother rolled her eyes at her son who said one thing and meant another. I was stunned by what I heard and finally understood what Eric meant by, unfortunately, when we met again. Suddenly feeling very guilty, I lowered my head and whispered, I'm sorry, to Eric. Eric's face was full of heartache, but he didn't say anything yet. Eric's mother spoke first. Why apologize to him? Needless to say, I know that Eric bullied you, so you ran away. Humph, you can't escape my eyes. If Eric dares to bully you again next time, tell me and I will beat him up. Although I have never dealt with Eric's mother before, it turns out that she is such a nice person. I am ashamed of my superficiality. I held her hand with my backhand. Thank you, Mom. 15. So you didn't run away because I touched you that time? After leaving Eric's house, Eric seemed to have figured out some things. How could it be because of something like that? My face suddenly felt hot and I didn't know what to say. Eric took his answer from my silence. Okay. Eric grinned. That father I've never met has left me with a scar after all. Who would have known that it turned out that they didn't care at all, and it seemed that I was the only one who cared so much. I lowered my head like a child who had done something wrong. No, I'm so angry, Sean, give me a kiss. Eric got angrier and angrier as he thought about it, and suddenly he stopped and hugged me. I obediently pulled his collar, raised my feet and kissed him. Are you still angry now? I'm not angry anymore. I kissed him again. Are you happy now? Happy. Eric, who got the advantage, smiled like a fool. I kissed him again. Then do you love me? I love you so much, Sean. I love you too, Eric. This autumn, let's be together.